Sit down, please, sit down. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I never thought that I would be a guest speaker for an organization that is out there to, not to promote divorce, God forbid, but to be there for people who need a divorce. Why do I say that? Unfortunately, we live in a society where divorce is not frowned upon. Divorce rate today in America is soaring. There are states that the divorce rate is over 50%, 60%. You know what that means for the average American? You stand under the canopy and you exchange vows. For better, for worse, for health or for sickness, for richer or for poor. Till death do us part, help me God. And you only have less than a 50% chance of making it. It's unbelievable. It's really wild. You know, I grew up in the community in Bensonhurst. I lived on a block which was predominantly Italians and Jews. That's who we were. And nobody got a divorce. It was unheard of. We as children growing up, you never heard the word divorce. One time, you know, we used to sleep in the summertime with the windows open because it was so hot. Nobody had air conditioning. And you had screens on your window. And one time I was a little boy. I could have been, 10, 11 years old. And my room faced the driveway. It was a shared driveway with another two-family house. And I heard screaming, and I woke up. And I look at the window, and there's my neighbor Tony, down on one knee with his wife on the second floor screaming at him to get out of here and never come back because he didn't come home that night. And she's tossing all his clothes out the window. And I was really affected, and he's begging Maria to come back in. Get out of here, I don't want you no more. By the end of the day, he was back home in the house. That's the way it was. Your parents fought, but nobody got divorced. You went down the aisles with your children, you went down the aisle with your grandchildren, and that's the way it was. Today it's very, very different. A girl went on a blind date, and she came home, and her mother asked how it was. She says, I don't know, Ma, I'm wondering, is this the man I want my children to spend every other weekend with or not? That's what it is today. It's really something not to be believed. Our children go into to the town where you go in to get a marriage license, yeah, and they have to fill out a marriage form. Did you ever see this marriage form? It says, if you are divorced, please fill out to who and when the divorce was. There's one line, 2 lines, 3 lines, then there's a star. You look on the bottom, it says, if you need more space, please see the clerk. Yeah, it's what happened to us? Prenuptial agreements, which we're going to speak about tonight, there was no such thing. God forbid, a prenuptial may mean that, hey, we may not make it, so let's take care of our interests right now. I was walking to my car one day, and there was a flyer on the car. I thought it was a ticket. I walk over in Brooklyn, Kings Highway, divorce, $169. Contact us, a lawyer's firm. Could you imagine such a thing? How do we prevent this terrible plague, which has already infested our people, even in our own community? I once called up a dayan, a rabbinical judge, to arrange for a divorce. And I said, it's imperative that we get it right away. We're afraid the fellow is going to run away. So he says, I've been trying to contact all the scribes that write the Gittin, the Gets, and no one's open for the next 2 weeks. Nobody has a slot. Could you imagine? They could write 3, 4, maximum 5 Gittin a day, and nobody has a slot for 2 weeks. It's really, really horrifying of what's going on today, okay? So what do? We have to understand, like we just heard, that divorce is really not a viable solution to your problems. Certainly not for your children. It's really a tragedy. You know, it says that when somebody gets divorced, the Mizbeach cries. The Mizbeach cries. Firstly, we have to understand and accept and appreciate that your spouse is the right one. You know, there are two Pesukim in the Torah. They are very, very contradictory. One Pasuk says, Matzah Isha Matzah Tov. I found a wife, I found goodness. The other Pasuk says, Motzeh Ani Mar Mimavet Et Isha. I found something more bitter than death, the woman. One says, Matzah Isha Matzah Tov. I found goodness. The other one says, no, I found death. How do we reconciliate these two Pesukim? And I once heard Rabbi Miller say, Matzah Isha Matzah Tov. Matzah is a lashon of finding. Matzah means I found something which is mine. When I get married and I look at my wife and I say, this is the one, there's nobody else. She belongs to me. She's my better half. There's nothing any better. That's Matzah Tov. You found goodness. You found your find. Motzeh ani iman mimavet. I found something more bitter than death. Motzeh is a lashon, is a terminology of searching, seeking. If somebody gets married and says, oh, I married her, but I'm still looking. Is this the right one? Maybe I should have married the other one. Maybe I shouldn't got married. Maybe I should have waited. That's more bitter than death. So the first thing we have to know, when we get married, it's Matzah Isha Matzah Tov. I found my find. This is the right one, and there's nobody else, and I have to make it work. And that's the way our parents were, and that's the way our grandparents were. I asked a man from Syria, how many divorces were there in Syria? He says, there was never, ever a divorce. I said, what? He says, actually, there was one divorce in all the years that they lived in Syria, in the last 100 years, but not because they didn't get along, because of sickness. Fine. He says, there was one man that used to come to the Beit Din every week. The Beit Din used to sit in Syria and Halab every week, once a week. And there was a man that used to come every week, and he says, I want a divorce. Give me a get. And they would tell him, come back next week. He came back every week for 27 years, but he was never granted the divorce. Right? That's the way it was. Plain and simple. So what is it? How do we do it? How do we stay married and put this organization out of business? That's what we want, and that's what the founders of this organization want. How do we do it? Well, we first have to know that, I want to ask you a question, by the way. Typical American gets married. Within a short time, he may be divorced. A year, 2 years, maybe less. Wait a minute, 1 minute. They dated for 4 years or more before they got married. So how'd this happen? Okay. You have to understand something. When you go into a marriage, it has to be to give, not to take. And most people go into a marriage to take, not to give. And then they have this big disappointment that my spouse wants me to give. And it's a very, very big disappointment in life. And that starts the cycle. You know this gift giving that we have before we get married? Swannies. Ladies and gentlemen, I went to a Swanny one time. I thought it was a Chinese auction. I was looking for the boxes. Okay. So these two kids get married, and before they get married, they give and they give and they give and they give and they give. And then once they get married, the gift giving stops, and somewhat of a disappointment there. And that's when it starts. I have to go into a marriage to give, not to take. By the way, how do you know giving is better than taking? When you give, you end up loving that person. How do you know? You have children? Do they make you crazy? They say insanity is hereditary. You get it from your kids. Junior could drive you crazy. And the principal's calling you every other day. And he comes home and he kills his siblings. And you don't know what to do with him. But guess what? You love him. Why do you love him? Throw him out. You know why you love him? Because you've been giving him from the day he's born. And the more you give, the more you love the person. So if you go into a marriage to give, and not take, okay, most probably you will succeed in your marriage. No question about it. The major cause for a soaring divorce rate is because old time Shalom Bayit was constantly to give, not to take. Today, things have changed. We live in a very selfish society, and our children are surrounded by this. And with the social media that's going on out there, okay, it's terrible. We don't know how to respect the spouse. This is what's going on. You know, there was a great rabbi, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem in the 1930s, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. So a man came over to him and he asked him, are you allowed to drink coffee before prayer in the morning? He said, yes. He says, well, why don't you do it? He says, because if my wife would know that I drink coffee early in the morning when she's sleeping, she'll get up earlier than me to make me the coffee. So therefore, I don't drink coffee. That's a marriage. That is a marriage. And I'm going to conclude with one story from the Tanakh. There was an Ish Sadiq by the name of Ovadia. The Tanakh brings down the story. And he was an administrator in the royal house. Good. And there was a couple by the name of Ahav, a king who was wicked, who was married to a witch by the name of Izebel. And Izebel decided that she wants to kill all the prophets. And she was killing them, and there was hundreds of prophets. Her husband, Ovadia, took 100 prophets, put his life in danger, and hid them in 2 different caves. And he supported them. And he brought them food and water every day. He brought them oil so they could sit and study Torah. Yeah? And this Ovadia spent his entire life savings on supporting these 100 prophets. It got to a point where he depleted his entire life savings. After that, he started selling his furniture and his belongings, and his wife sold her jewelry, and she was in on this with him. And then he had no choice but to borrow money. He had nothing left. And he went to a wicked man, and he borrowed money from this wicked man who charged him large interest. And he got sick from it. And he didn't know what to do. The time was coming to pay the man back, and he didn't have the money. He got so sick, he ended up on his deathbed. And he was dying. And his wife went crying to him. And she was crying and crying. She says, you can't die on me now. What am I going to do if you die? How am I going to pay back the debt? And he said that Ribono Shel Olam, God is Avi Yetomim v'Dayan Albanot. God is the judge of all orphans and widows. And he died leaving her with nothing. The wicked man Yehoram came to her to collect the debt. And he said to her, if I don't have the money in a few days, I'm going to take your 2 sons as slaves. And he was powerful enough to do that. She didn't know what to do. She went to the cemetery and she went to her husband's grave and she cried and she cried and she said, you told me God is Avi Yetomim v'Dayan Almanot. He's going to take our 2 sons slaves. What am I to do? A bat call, a voice came out from heaven and told her, go to Elisha the Navi and he will help you. She went to Elisha the Navi and she cried her eyes out. She wept bitter tears. And he said to her, what do you have in your home? What do you own? And she said, En mishivhatech kol babayit. Your maidservant has nothing in the house, ki im asoch shemen, except one little pach of shemen, a little pitcher of oil. That's all I own. He said, good. Go to all the neighbors and borrow all their pots and vases and urns and anything that could hold liquid. And take that one small flask of oil you have and pour it in all of them. Don't stop. And keep getting more and more vessels. Okay? In those days, as crazy as it sounds, they used to listen to the rabbi. Okay? She went home and she told her son, go borrow from all the neighbors pots and pans and vases and urns and whatever. She laid them all out and she took the one little out and she poured oil and oil and oil and oil. She told her, and he told her, don't stop. And she told her sons, go get more pots. The entire apartment was full of oil. Okay, that was it. It was over. The Navi told her, go and sell the oil, pay back the debt, and keep the change to support yourself. The oil that day shot up in price. She went and sold it. She was able to sell all the oil and have enough money to live for the rest of her life after she paid the debt. Why did that happen? Why did that miracle happen to her? Because her husband and wife were a team. They were a team. And when you're a team, ish v'isha shezachu, a husband and wife that have shalom bayit, Shekhinah b'nehem, the Shekhinah lives amongst them. The divine presence lives amongst them. And God will be willing to do miracles for you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is tough. This organization is tough. It's tough. It's heart-wrenching. Sean, where is he? He must have called me about 150 times till I ever came to the phone. I said, what do you mean you have an organization to divorce people? Leave me alone. I'm not interested. Get out of here. Then he called me, wait, don't hang up. We got a few agonot again. I said, you did what? Now you're talking. He got some agonot, him and Mr. Ashkenazi. They got agonot, some gitin. I'm in. Tell me what you want. I don't even know his last name. I just met Mr. Ashkenazi. All as I know is these tzaddikim, these angels, are helping women get divorced so they could remarry and have a marriage like we were just talking about. Okay? This is something unbelievable. I would love if they had in their organization a department for reconciliation. Do you have that? To attempt to try and get them to stay together. Get them therapists. Get them whatever you need, psychologists, psychiatrists. Throw the crazy husband in a rehab. Do whatever you have to do to try and keep them together. Okay, but when there's no choice and you need to, ladies and gentlemen, I'm in this field for 40 years. I worked with many agunot, and we succeeded in getting some of them gitin. It's a living hell, you'll excuse me, for the aguna and for the people that are trying to get them gitin. This is something which is heart-wrenching. You lose sleep. I don't know if these men sleep at night. Okay, you lose sleep over it. What, one of you married to one of them? Okay, your son. Okay. It's God bless them, and God bless this organization. And like I said, we want to put them out of business. The way to put them out of business is to get people to stay married. Okay, when possible. And Be'ezrat Hashem, if we do that, first of all, we have to help them. I don't know, you need to fundraise. They need to fundraise. They need money for this. I'm sure you have lawyers involved, other people involved. What? I'll help them. I told you. We'll help them. You bring me people that are getting agunot divorces, we'll help them. Okay? We'll help them. They need help. They need money. They need support. Whatever it is. I mean, I was like shooken up this week. I'm seeing posters with my picture all over it about help people get. Okay? It's a little hard. It's a little tough. I'm supporting marriages my whole life. Trying to keep people there. But this is what it's come to. Lo alenu. We want to bring back the old days when nobody gets divorced. Fight and stay married. Stay married. Okay? Be'ezrat Hashem. With God's help, and Hashem's going to help them because they work l'shem shamayim. Be'ezrat Hashem. We'll come to the day where we'll make a sudat hoda'ah, the day we have to close this organization, and every woman who needs a get, only who needs a get, will have a get, and they'll be able to go on with their lives, rebuild their lives, get married again, and be happily ever after. Amen.